stay here. Dan has prepared a very special message that I'm so very happy for everyone to hear, particularly this evening, particularly with the fact that we realize that there are things that make us different, things that make us the same, but we're all great global communicators. So everybody, Dan Rex.
A little bit. How many of you are not Toastmasters members, or living with a Toastmasters member? We know there are issues with that. It tends to jump into one's life and take over a little bit. So, for those of you who support Toastmasters members in a variety of ways, thank you. We appreciate that. So, Toastmasters around the world. There are Toastmasters clubs in 122 countries. Right about 300,000 members in our program at any point in time. It's an amazing accomplishment. Toastmasters has been around for 90 years. That's pretty old. And the program is working phenomenally. We can't keep up with the growth. North America Toastmasters growing at about 3 or 4% a year. In the economy that we've had since 2008, that's pretty darn good. Outside of North America, depending on the country, might be 8%, might be 10%, might be 25%. Areas of amazing growth for Toastmasters right now. India is on fire. China is on fire. Malaysia is on fire. And what I mean by that is India is adding maybe 70 clubs a year. 4 or 5 years ago, there was 1 district there. Now there are 4 districts in India. And all of these numbers are great. And organizationally, we look at that and we're very happy about it. But the reality is that all of those numbers don't mean anything without the members of every Toastmasters club. So who here has been a member for more than 5 years? Okay, so you can all put your hands down. Who here has been a member for less than 2 months? Anyone? Anyone? Will you join me for that then? I'm going to put you on the spot. This young lady has been a member for less than 2 months. I want you to tell me a little bit about your experience. Tell us why you joined.
I wanted to be a better public speaker.
Excellent. You came to the right place for that. What club do you belong to?
Aptos Hyman.
And how many speeches have you given so far?
I gave my icebreaker 2 weeks.
You did your icebreaker in 2 weeks. I think that we'll all come to your club meeting and support you. That's how we won't do that to you. Have you done table topics yet?
Yes.
Tell us about the first time you did table topics.
It was terrifying.
How about the second time?
Still terrifying.
Okay. It'll get better.
I vote counted last week. That was.
You did? You vote
It was less terrifying.
Less terrifying than table topics. Anyone been there? You remember those days, right? You remember table topics when the table topics master would get up there and you'd look at the table. You wanted nothing to do with that. You'll get past that. It'll get better. And we all really do wish that we could be there for your icebreaker, but we wish you much success. Thank you very much for The reality is that Toastmasters is not about me or Mike Marshall, who's your international director, or Rita Barber, who's your district governor. Toastmasters is about the member experience and what happens every meeting at your club when you and your other members go through something that helps you be better. And it might be table topics that really frightens you, and I guarantee you that in a year it won't frighten you anymore. Yeah, that's a guarantee. But what about speaking? That first icebreaker, you might not sleep a lot the night before. Your 10th speech, you're probably going to sleep a lot, but for me, I still have butterflies on my 10th speech, still have butterflies on my 40th speech, still have butterflies on every single speech I give. I give about 10 a week. And I'm still nervous. Am I hiding it? Because I'm still nervous right now. See, your sympathy is overwhelming. How many of you speak a language other than English? Yeah, that's a lot. Right? How many of us only speak English? Yeah, that's kind of a bummer, isn't it? No, actually, we all speak more languages than we think, because we have to communicate on a variety of topics and subjects all the time. And how we learn to communicate those concepts, It's not exactly like learning another language, but have you ever talked to a software programmer if you're not a software programmer? An engineer of some sort? You just think, wow, I don't have any idea what they're talking about. So Toastmasters can help you in any type of communication. We help engineers. We help engineers not be so engineering anymore. We help them be able to talk to regular people. That's a big, important part of what Toastmasters does, a huge part of our global market. One of the things that is going on in Toastmasters right now is an explosion in clubs in languages other than English. And I left my paper over here that has some numbers on it, so I'm going to run over here and grab it. So let's talk for a minute about these other languages. Arabic-speaking clubs. Anyone ever been to an Arabic-speaking Toastmasters club? There are 77 clubs around the world that speak Arabic as their primary club language. French, 153. A lot of those in Eastern Canada, some of those in French, and others scattered all around the world. Chinese, want to give me an estimate, anyone? Thousands here. Did I hear one from the back row? One? That would be kind of a boring contest tonight. So just around 200. Now the interesting thing about Chinese is that it's spread across more countries than any other language in Toastmasters other than English. So there's China, where of course there are going to be some Chinese-speaking clubs, but there are very few, many more English-speaking clubs in China than there are Chinese-speaking clubs. Taiwan, another big place in Chinese-speaking clubs, but also Malaysia and Singapore, and even here in the United States. All over the world, many, many Chinese speakers in Toastmasters. German, 55 clubs. Japanese, 49 clubs. And about 5 of those are in Taiwan. That's an interesting thing. Taiwan has, in the district there, they have 4 languages that they typically use. Portuguese, only 4, but growing. Brazil is an emerging market for us. And then Spanish. Anyone ever been to a Spanish-speaking Toastmasters club? Do we have those in District 4 right now? There we go. 234. So 234. So behind English, that's the #1 language in Toastmasters. And about 185 of those are in Mexico, and the rest are scattered somewhere else in the world. In strange places like Omaha, Nebraska. Now, who would have thought you'd have a Spanish-speaking club in Omaha, Nebraska? But we do. There are some challenges with these growing markets around the world. I want to share with you a little bit about how Toastmasters is different in other places. In many ways, it's the same. When you go to a club meeting, there are speakers and there are evaluators and a table topics master and table topics that we're afraid of, and all those things that are normal, a timer. But there are some other things. The first time I went to a club meeting in Bahrain in the Middle East, there was a member who got up at the very beginning of the meeting and he said, "Now, just to remind everyone, we will not talk about sex, politics, or religion." Like it was a rule. And I immediately thought, what would we talk about in the United States if we didn't talk about sex, politics, or religion in our Toastmasters clubs? But that's just the way it works over there. If you ever get a chance to go to China and go to a Toastmasters club there, it's a very interesting experience. Because there might be a member of the secret police on the back row observing the meeting, and they're there a lot. Very seriously, they're there a lot. So in China, Toastmasters isn't legally recognized. There's not a construct within their legal system for something like Toastmasters. So when we talk to them, they say, you can have meetings, that'll be fine for now. And then we kind of see how that goes. But there are 2 districts and several hundred Toastmasters clubs in China. So if you get a chance to visit any of those, I would highly recommend it. Elsewhere in the Middle East, there are other interesting pieces that relate to how the clubs function over there. Anyone remember the Arab Spring in 2011? So Toastmasters helps us learn our primary competencies, our communication skills, and leadership skills. So then what do you do with those once you have them? You use them. So you feel that you can talk about whatever you're passionate about. And if you're in a country where perhaps you believe that some of the things aren't right and you want to change them, you may stand up and talk about those things. And it may not go well for you. And that's what happened with some of our Toastmasters and former Toastmasters during that time in the Middle East. Some of them were on news standing on top of cars, using the skills. And Toastmasters does not espouse or not espouse any type of political belief or thought or anything like that. We simply give you the skills and you do with them what you will. But I do remember getting a message from a distraught family whose family member was in prison, asking if Toastmasters could do anything to help this person get free again. So communication affects us, and it gives us tools and allows us and enables us to do things that we can't imagine today. Toastmasters makes us better in ways that we don't understand. I went to a Toastmasters club in India, and I was really old for that club. I'm only 49, I don't think I'm that old. But the average age of this club is about 23. That's not the norm for Toastmasters in North America. But it certainly is the norm in some of these other pockets of Toastmasters around the world. So even though the Toastmasters club experience is the same, Toastmasters is different in every single place. One final story to close. I was in Bahrain, and Bahrain's an interesting place. For me, culturally, it was so dramatically different than anything I'd experienced before. And I spent the afternoon with a company, and this is a large petrochemical company that sponsors Toastmasters. Now think about this, if your company would do this for you. Toastmasters is a part of their human resources program to such a degree that if you get a CC or any other education award in Toastmasters, you automatically get a 10% salary increase. How about that? So, Michael's over here going, oh man. I'm not doing that at Walmart. It's the only company in the world that I know that does that. And if you want a promotion and they start looking through your personnel file, you better have some Toastmasters club officer experience in there. Can you imagine that your club officer experience is part of your personnel file at your office? Take this very, very seriously. So when we arrived at this company, we walked into the building, and there was this long line of people shaking our hands outside, and it was a kind of a very ceremonial thing. And we walked into a long room, and it had a wood floor like this, beautiful hangings on the walls, tapestry, and there's a portrait of the King of Bahrain with his robes on standing there, and a little table at the end with chairs on either side. And I thought, oh, I wonder who's going to sit there. And they hauled me over and sat me down in that chair, and I thought, that's pretty cool. I actually, I don't know, it was really strange. And then the boss came down and sat next to me, the senior vice president of the company, something like that. And he starts talking to me about how Toastmasters is working in their company, and he pulls out a big 3-ring binder, and he starts paging through it. And he has in there photocopies of all the certificates that all the employees of the company have ever earned in Toastmasters. So all the CCs and the ACs and DTMs and all of those things were in there. He starts going through that. And he starts going through it, and this person won a speech contest, and this person did that, and this person did all these things. It's the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And then we went on a tour. And if you're a petrochemical company in the Middle East, one of your objectives is to sell all your stuff and make a lot of money, and then the other objective is to convince everyone that you're not ruining the planet. So they had a really cool garden with palm trees planted, and they had a fish farm in the water right outside where their plant was. And we're not killing the fish, we're growing the fish, we're giving them to the poor people, we're planting all these trees, we're doing all these good things. And there was an entourage that walked with us throughout the day, and there were probably 8 men and 1 woman. Now, if you've not been to the Middle East, there are different norms related to physical contact between men and women. So I presented some certificates, and like we do with the trophy, we shake hands. Well, men and women in our culture don't touch, so they don't shake hands. They're just different things. So having this female in the middle of this group all day long was a very interesting thing to me. And she was clearly of influence in the group, but not quite a peer in this group. And so they showed us the whole thing, and then took us to a luncheon. And at the luncheon, I'm going to get to the point here in a minute. At the luncheon, the president of this company finally showed up. And he had been meeting that morning with the king. He's one of the senators in the country, and a very impressive guy. and he was about this big. So there's some really funny photos of the two of us together. But we started talking, and he's telling me how Toastmasters is helping his country and helping his company. And he said, you know that we need to change. We're just not quite sure how to do it yet. We know change is coming. This was January 2011. So this was in the months right before the Arab Spring and right before all the chaos in his country. And we talked about that a little bit. And all the leadership in the company had been educated either here in the US or in the UK. So finally I had the courage to ask him. I said, so this young lady's been with us all day. And she's not said a lot, but clearly, she's kind of moving us along and making sure that things work right. And my question made him a little uncomfortable. And so I kind of leaned down a little bit to hear what he was going to say. And he said, she's contributing well in our company. Toastmasters has helped her a lot. He paused for a minute. And he looked around to make sure that no one could hear him except me. And he said, she talks back to me now. And from this guy, a hugely powerful guy in his country, and in that culture, to have this female manager at his company talking back to him. And I could tell from the look in his eye, he wasn't quite sure what to do with that. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with that. And I said, okay. And he said, I'm not sure, Dan, how I feel about that. But I know it's a good thing. And that little slice of an afternoon is something that I'll never forget. And when I think about our Toastmasters world and each of our Toastmasters experience, I think of her and I think of him. And I think of each of us. And do we latch on to this opportunity? Do we take the skills that we've learned and do something with them? Do we as leaders allow change to happen? But do we have the courage to force change to happen? And that young lady does. So I'll ask you tonight, have you changed since the first day you walked into a Toastmasters meeting? Are you a better person? Are you a stronger person? Are you a more talented person? Even if you haven't done your icebreaker yet? You probably are. And you feel good about that. And you go to your club meeting and it all feels good. And then you go back to your life. How many of you have changed your life because of what you learned in Toastmasters? So when you talk about innovation, there's step change, which is making things a little bit better, and then there's a radical change, right? So how many of you have yet made that radical change in your life? Yeah, not as many hands go up. Some do. But I'll challenge you, and I want a verbal yes or no on this. I want to challenge you to make that radical change, to get that next job, to get out of your job and do something that you really want to do, to be your boss's boss's boss someday, right? To take that big radical change. Will you commit to me today to take that big radical change? Yes. Okay, now everybody who didn't say yes and is going to say no, go ahead and say no now. Nobody. All right. Thanks so much for having me here tonight. It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this contest. And Bina, I'm going to turn control of the meeting over to you now. So let's give her a welcome.